Hey folks, Gway. I want to come back and talk again about the Pope's apology. As you know, Pope Francis is in Canada right now, apologizing to the Indigenous peoples of this country for the Roman Catholic Church's role in the Canadian residential school system. A system that was here for well over a century and caused harm to hundreds of thousands of people across generations. He's traveling around the country right now, visiting various Indigenous communities, saying, "I'm sorry," and asking for forgiveness. But there was something in his apology, and I'll include a link to his entire apology in this video in the comments. But there was something in his apology that I think we would be very wise to apply to ourselves today, especially given the conversations that we see that seem to be much more prevalent now than they were a few years ago about the church's role when it comes to the state. How the church should be the one telling the state how to act and what laws they can and cannot legislate, demanding that the government uphold a moral value system that the church claims is righteous and good and true and proper. The Pope says, "I'm sorry for the ways in which, regrettably, many Christians supported the colonizing mentality of the powers that oppress the Indigenous peoples. I am sorry, and I ask forgiveness, in particular for the ways in which many members of the church and of religious communities cooperated, not the least of which, through their indifference, in projects of cultural destruction and forced assimilation promoted by the governments at that time, which culminated in a system of residential schools." I think in this portion of the apology, he is apologizing for and reminding us of a temptation that the church has notoriously, since its inception, fallen into over and over and over and over and over again. He's apologizing for the church, not just the Roman Catholic Church, but the Anglican Church, the United Church, and all the other churches involved with the residential school program in Canada. He's apologizing for our first sin, the sin of arrogance, a believing that we, as an organization, know best. We know best, and we are uniquely qualified to tell people how to live, to tell them what they should believe, to tell them what kind of clothes they should wear, what kind of foods they should eat, what language they should speak. Tell them who they should look like, how they should cut their hair. The church believed the myth of their own grandeur. And because they did that, they became happy, willing partners with the government in the residential school program. We weren't taken advantage of, and we weren't tricked into this. We knew exactly what was going on. But we believed in the myth of our own grandeur. We believed in our importance. We believed in our understanding. We believed in our ways. And we forsook the ways of Jesus Christ. We used ourselves as the lens through which we would come to know Jesus. We used our organization as the lens through which we would come to know Jesus and what Jesus calls us to do. Instead of turning to Jesus and through that relationship tearing away the biases and the cultures and the different things that we bring to this relationship, we did it the other way. And that sin of ours, tore apart cultures, communities, and generations of people. We, going forward, must always be careful. Always be careful when we hear that beautiful, cute, soothing, wonderful, alluring voice that tells us, that whispers in our ears that you know best. You should be in control. You, and you alone, can make things right. You are somehow perfectly situated and perfectly qualified, uniquely qualified to be in power, to be in control. As we walk with Christ, as a Christian walks with Christ, one of the things we are called to through the Gospels is that we must always remain humble. As much as is possible to remain humble, to continuously strive to remember who we are, what we are, to remember where we've come from, and to remember who has brought us from there to here, and why. We must continuously remember that we are followers of a shepherd. That we are not God's shepherd. We are not God's master. We are not God's instructor. We are not God's teacher. We are not God's equal, but rather we are followers, learners, listeners, servants. We must be humble. Because if we are not humble, the moment we lose that humility, we begin a process that has dire, horrific consequences for ourselves and throughout history, most especially for the people around us. The churches at the time of the residential schools should have been the ones standing up for the Indigenous people. Standing up for them, standing up beside them, advocating for them, advocating for their rights, advocating that the treaties that the government, the Crown signed were respected and were enacted. The church chose the other way. And instead of being a support, instead of being an encouragement, instead of being a provider, we became a destroyer of lives because we believed the myth of our own grandeur. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that as you and I continue this journey throughout life, we will cherish, defend, and hold on to for all dear life our humility. Recognizing that the moment we let go of our humility is the same moment we become a danger to everyone around us. Amen. Numultus.